5 years on from Libya's revolution, Gaddafi's reign may be a memory, but is the country better off than it was before? Also on today's program, the reopening of Libya's refugee route, why there's been a surge of people trying to reach Italy across the Mediterranean Sea. And in picture this, stunning images of the sky from space. Astronauts capture the auroras from the International Space Station. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. It's been 5 years since Libya's revolution. An assortment of rebel groups routed Colonel Muammar Gaddafi's forces in 6 months of fighting with the help of Western airstrikes. Gaddafi, who led Libya for 42 years, was killed after he was found hiding in a drain. There could hardly be a more ignominious end for one of the region's longest-lasting leaders. But while the revolution may be over, the fighting is not. Libya has endured half a decade of chaos, rival militias, competing governments, and Daesh all battling for control. At the end of last month, a deal was signed handing power to a new unity government. Now it has the unenviable task of returning security to the country. Our newsmaker today is Muammar Gaddafi, as we ask if removing him from power was the right decision for Libya.
Violence, destruction, and lawlessness. Years of fighting in Libya have made the country one of the most unstable in the world. But Libya's state of chaos was not what Western leaders had in mind when they helped depose the regime of Colonel Muammar Gaddafi.
After 42 years, Colonel Gaddafi's rule of fear has come to an end.
The last major regime strongholds have fallen.
Maintenant, c'est aux Libyens de tourner la page des années terribles de M. Gaddafi.
As part of the Arab Spring, the Libyan revolution brought hope for regime change. But on the streets of Benghazi today, the rewards of that struggle have yet to be seen. Libya has no central government, and the fighting hasn't stopped, leading many to question whether getting rid of Gaddafi was the right move. To some, Gaddafi was a liberator. To others, a tyrannical dictator. After decades of tensions with the West, he became a partner and a big supplier of oil. But when demonstrations broke out in 2011, Gaddafi once again became the enemy. NATO-led airstrikes supported rebels in their fight against Gaddafi forces and helped them conquer the country. But since then, a civil war has broken out, fragmenting Libya, fought over by several rival governments. The General National Congress is in the capital, while the House of Representatives governs the far eastern city of Tobruk. But international efforts are now geared toward legitimizing a third unity government in Tripoli. Foreign diplomats have been flocking to Libya to get others to back it. The U.S. has even threatened to take action against those refusing to support the new government. The chaos of a post-Gaddafi Libya has generated some nostalgia for stability under his regime. Supporters credit him with developing unrivaled healthcare and education systems. They blame lawlessness for the advances of Daesh and other armed groups in the country, and point to Libya becoming a springboard for refugees heading to Europe. The international community are pinning their hopes on the new unity government to finally rebuild Libya. The question is whether any agreement can swiftly change the politics of old. Sandra Gathmann, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now to discuss whether Libya has been better or worse off since Gaddafi's ousting is award-winning journalist and Libya analyst Mustafa Fetouri. He joins me from Paris. And in Manchester is Dr. Ahmed Sowehli. He's a former health official for Libya's National Transitional Council. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Ahmed Sowehli, let me start with you.
Thank you for having me.
Libya didn't just not become a democracy, Ahmed. It became an awful mess and a failed state. Do you often ask yourself whether it was worth ousting Gaddafi for this?
I agree with the first part of your statement that it became an awful mess. Libyans were not taught democracy. For 40 years, they were under an autocratic regime which made sure that any kind of dissent was punished and punished severely. So for them to suddenly understand democracy, that was not going to happen at all. And something which I need to point out right from the start is that even since the getting rid of Gaddafi, there are still Gaddafi men very much involved in Libyan politics at this moment in time. The head of the internationally recognized parliament in Tobruk was swearing loyalty to Gaddafi in his tent 10 days before the revolution. General Haftar was Gaddafi's loyal officer for so many years, and he killed so many people in Chad and Libya in the 80s. Mahmoud Jibril, who is in the United Arab Emirates and still has a big political party in Libya, he was Gaddafi's planning minister. So to think that Gaddafi's regime has suddenly disappeared, that has not happened. In terms of 5 years after the revolution, that is a very short space of time. It is very upsetting that we are in this situation. Hopefully things will get better.
Okay, Mustafa Faturik, give them more time. And rather than the mess being because Gaddafi was ousted, rather it's the enduring influence of Gaddafi that's one of the curses to the nation, according to Ahmed. What do you think, Mustafa?
Well, I don't know what our colleague Ahmed would like to see more time for. I mean, another 10 years or 20 years. The problem is what is going on in Libya now is the basis on which they are rebuilding the state is totally wrong. So when you are building something on baseless grounds, that means however you build it, however nice it comes out, it is going to collapse sooner or later. And then let me just jump back to a couple of sentences, Ahmed, comments made by our colleague there in the UK, I understand. The head of the Libyan parliament in Tobruk, the elected parliament in Tobruk, he said this is a sworn loyalist to Gaddafi, and he swore his loyalty to him in his tent. Well, at that time, I remember seeing almost every city and town, swearing allegiance and loyalty to Gaddafi himself, including people from Mr. Ahmed's hometown. So that is not something to try to say what is spoiling the party maybe in Libya nowadays is the former regime's man is totally unacceptable, and it's not true. It just contradicts the facts. What we are seeing today is the infighting between the different groups who represent the revolution, more or less in Eastern Libya or Western Libya or in the south of the country as well. General Khalifa Haftar, as mentioned, he's not a loyal person to the former regime. He has not been for the last 25 or 30 years. He was a captured prisoner in the war in Chad in the 1980s, and then he became a sworn enemy of the former regime. So to try to blame everything that's going wrong in the former regime is that's totally false.
Sure, I want to come in here, Mustafa, because we have to keep this moving on. These segments are not very long. I want to ask you, yes, we have established that the place is a mess. But then again, Gaddafi's regime, you had a crime family, dissidents disappeared, there were rape dungeons, there was wanton killing for decades. He financed international terrorism and triggered all sorts of problems, not only in Africa, but the Middle East as well. Are you in any way pining for his leadership? You're not at all suggesting that things were better off under him, are you?
No, of course not. Well, it depends on what you mean by things. The overall picture of Libya today is worse than it was under Gaddafi for the last 40 years or so. So it depends what you mean by that. But if you ask me,
I'll tell you what I mean. Was it better under Gaddafi?
Okay.
Should Gaddafi have stayed? Let me then rephrase the question and put it bluntly. Should he have stayed?
Well, of course, everything was better under Gaddafi. I have to confess to this. Every Libyan have to confess to this. I mean, it's a reality. It's a fact of life. Today, I was in Tripoli just 2 weeks ago. I spent over 4 months there, and I have been talking to people all over the country. I have been writing this in my reports, and actually, people are feeling kind of they have been cheated. If there was a revolution at all in 5 years ago, in 2011,
okay. Let's bring Ahmed in
then it was stolen from the Libyans, and it was taken over by some others.
Okay, Ahmed.
I must agree. I must agree with my friend in Paris that Libya was better under Gaddafi for those people who did exactly what they were told and who never would say a word against Gaddafi's regime. It was definitely not better for the 1,300 prisoners who were killed in 3 hours in the 1990s and who disappeared off the face of the earth. Until now, we don't know what's happened to them.
Well, even in that one, you know, even in that one, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but even in that one, let me just jump in for a second.
Okay, guys, one at a time. Let's get Ahmed to finish his point.
I believe that.
Mustafa, let's get Ahmed to finish his point. Please, gentlemen, one at a time.
Okay.
Dissident students were hanged in Libya universities in the 70s and in the 80s, hanged in public in front of their peers. So it wasn't better for them, was it, Mr. Fittori?
Mustafa?
Well, I do. I'm not denying this, but this does not make the country a whole evil, if you like, or the makes regime, the entire regime, or what it did for the country is a total evil. That's not true. That's not the case. I am not denying this. I'm not denying either the case of the Abu Salim prison, where it's a claim that 1,000 plus individuals or prisoners were killed. But we have to remember that one thing, especially in this case, that the jury in this one is still out. We are not definitely sure about what really happened. Was it a mutiny inside the jail? While I offer all my total sympathy for the family's victims, but we still are not sure about this because there has never been an independent inquiry. There was one attempt to try to find out what really happened in 2009, but it was not an easy thing to tackle at the time.
I want to move on. You made your point. You made your point. Ahmed, let me ask you a question, Ahmed. President Obama said that Libya was the biggest mistake of his presidency. Now, he's got regrets. He's not referring to implementation of the intervention. He's talking about the intervention itself. When you hear that from the US President Barack Obama, do you feel that perhaps the West shouldn't have got involved with all those airstrikes? Perhaps NATO, led by the US, shouldn't have done what they did?
I disagree with your interpretation of President Obama's comments. You'll remember that just before that comment, the week before, there was a big rift between him and David Cameron, and he had a go at the British and French. Now, I just want to remind you that one of Clinton's emails, which were published, said to Hillary Clinton that the British and French were playing a dirty game, in quotation marks, in the East with separatists. I think America left France and the UK to sort out Libya. I think they're the ones who helped make it a mess. I just want to say that 5 years after the revolution, if people come, historians in 100 years' time will look at what's happened after the revolution. They're not going to look at the first 5 years. That is no time at all. It's like saying, why is a 5-year-old not done a PhD or not become an engineer? They're only 5. So I think we need to be given a chance. Hopefully, the whole international community will come and help Libyans properly this time.
How much more time, Mr. Ahmed, do you suggest? How much more time? How much more time do you suggest? 20 years?
I'll tell you, as upsetting as it is, after the American Civil War, look how many years it took for America to become America. After the French Revolution, look at the bloodbath, which, thank God it didn't happen in Libya.
But my friend, this has not been a revolution. It's not a revolution. It has not been a revolution in Libya. It's something else. No, of course not. It's not. It's something else.
What is it, Mustafa? Mustafa, what is it?
Well, it is. Let me explain to you something. What has happened in 2011, if you want to call it a revolution, it does not fit the definition of revolution. What has happened, and to my understanding and the majority of people's understanding, is that the interests, if we could say, the interest of a small section of the Libyan society coincided in a very rare moment of history with the interests of superpowers, foreign powers who have been very angry with Gaddafi for over so many years, and at that moment they decided to get rid of the guy just for that, without any idea what will happen to Libya in the next 24 hours or so.
So you don't believe it was a revolution?
And
Mustafa,
of course it was not.
I want to move on for a second.
But I have to say something.
Please, can I move on? Please, can I move on?
Go ahead.
I want to move on because we're going to wrap in a minute and a half. Prime Minister Fayez Sarraj of the UN-backed unity government, they have a mandate to fix the mess right now. There were rival governments, militias crawling all over the place. There's a mandate backed by the UN to try and bring about stability in the country. Do you support their best attempts to bring peace to the country? Yes or no, Mustafa?
Well, I support the GNA, of course, with Mr. Sarraj and the top of it. But the problem is, I support it. It's not because the best option, but it's the only option we have. There is no other option. The political scene, those who dominated the political scene, those who dominated the political scene from 2011 until today, unfortunately, they failed miserably to offer any solution to anything in the country, and that's Libyans are fed up. They just support whatever it is.
I've got to jump in there. Mustafa and Ahmed, thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. We are out of time. Thanks again. Still to come on the Newsmakers, we're looking at why refugees are returning to one of the most dangerous routes into Europe. And in Picture This, the Northern Lights as you've never seen them before. This week, a boat carrying refugees sank on its way from Libya to Italy. Survivors say around 400 people were on board and most drowned. It comes almost a year after another boat capsized, making the same crossing, killing around 800 people. The latest incident happened a month after Turkey and the EU agreed a deal to prevent migrants using the Balkan route, raising concerns that they are returning to the more perilous crossing from Libya in order to reach Europe. The Newsmakers Randolph Nogel reports.
Desperation growing on the Greek-Macedonian border. Europe is shutting down its borders, leaving thousands of refugees stranded.
This is our last hope. There is nothing else. So we're just staying here until they find a solution.
A handful of people have been forced to return to Turkey under a recent deal between that country and the EU. But the agreement is already being threatened, with Ankara saying it will back out if the EU doesn't honor a key provision for Turkey: visa liberalization for its citizens.
Türkiye'nin Avrupa Birliği'ne olan ihtiyacından daha fazla Avrupa Birliği'nin Türkiye'ye ihtiyacı vardır, bunu böyle.
For now, the deal is having the intended effect: fewer refugees entering Europe from Turkey. But war and famine are still forcing people from their homes in the Middle East and North Africa. And with one major route for asylum seekers being squeezed shut, they're opting for another one, far more dangerous.
We must remember that the Balkan route is not the only one. I have in mind here the central Mediterranean route. The numbers of would-be migrants in Libya are alarming.
There are fears that the shutdown of the Aegean route into Europe will only shift the front line of the refugee crisis. Increased border security and forced returns mean fewer refugees are opting for the Turkey-Greece route. Now, the alternative route from North Africa into Italy is back in the spotlight. 4 out of 5 refugees who entered Europe last year came through Turkey, more than 1 million in total. But nearly 4 out of 5 people who died trying to enter the EU took the North Africa to Italy route. Last week, the Italian Coast Guard rescued more than 2,000 people in a single day. The UN is investigating reports that as many as 500 may have recently drowned. The EU-Turkey deal is taking aim at refugee flows and human smuggling, but many are asking whether it's a temporary solution with potentially deadly consequences. Randolph Nogel, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Athens to discuss the shift in migration routes and the impact the EU-Turkey deal is having is Andrew Connolly, a freelance journalist based in Greece who has been covering the refugee crisis for the past 2 years. Andrew, good to talk to you. You know the story more intimately than most other people. Are you convinced that the EU-Turkey deal has stopped one end and sort of caused the other end to burst open?
Not at all, actually. It's the most important point to make is that the people fleeing war, persecution, poverty are coming into Europe in different routes, and each route should be examined on its own merits. So the last year's surge in refugees coming to Europe from Turkey to Greece were primarily Syrians, Iraqis, and Afghans. The ones who are using the central Mediterranean route are, this year at least anyway, all Africans. The top 10 nationalities are Africans. The top 3 are Nigeria, Senegal, and Gambia. So it's absolutely false to say that right now one route is closed so they are using the other routes, because let's remember that route involves going through Libya, which because of different visa changes in recent times, Syrians cannot go there very easily by plane, and certainly not over land. Of course, we've seen that Daesh has started to co-opt the migration routes as well, and they've carried out executions on the shores of Libya. So it is the sub-Saharan and East Africans who are using that route still. The EU-Turkey deal had really nothing to do with this so far. It's still only 1 month old. What really made the difference was the closure of the border of Macedonia and further up the Balkans. This is what refugees in Turkey say, the reason that they are not choosing to cross right now. It's nothing to do with the EU-Turkey deal. For sure, once we see more deportations happening from the Greek islands of those who arrived after the 20th, certainly including Syrians, certainly that will send a message, and we'll see other routes spring up. But it's absolutely too soon to say if that's going to be the central Mediterranean route. There are other methods.
That's really interestingly put, very strongly put, and very compelling. Now, I wonder, there seems to be this massive disconnect between the sort of information you're privy to on the ground and I guess, you know, what the decision makers in Brussels are saying. Is there a fundamental disconnect? Do they just not get it in Brussels?
The plight of those fleeing those situations, it's not making legal avenues available for them. And also now what we see in Europe is not only its relation towards refugees, which certainly, if we look at public opinion, is becoming more apathetic and, to say actually, even more hostile, but it's about how Europe is treating the rest of its countries. For example, the frontline states of Italy and Greece, where I'm standing now. The closure, the unilateral closure of the border between Macedonia and Greece has effectively turned Greece into Europe's Lebanon. The idea was that the huge numbers going across European borders in the summer was unsustainable, which we can argue many had a point. But with no effective relocation strategy and resettlement strategy for the refugees stranded here, they will remain in Greece, and their money is slowly being reduced, and they're all reduced to poverty, so they don't even have money to use smugglers. So Greece, one of the most economically fragile countries in Europe, is forced to deal with them with hardly any support from the EU at all. The relocation plan, which was supposed to take 66,000 people, refugees, from Greece to other parts of the European Union, has only taken 646 so far. The Pope, when he visited the island of Lesbos at the weekend, took 12 Syrian refugees back to Italy, which is more than at least 18 EU member states have managed in the last 6 months. So unless they honour their commitments, Greece is going to be put under an extreme pressure which it cannot afford.
Okay, Andrew, great to talk to you. Hope to have you on the show again. Andrew Connolly joining us there from Greece. In today's Picture This, NASA has released a collection of new time-lapse videos of the northern and southern lights filmed from the International Space Station. This is beautiful. Let's take a look. Today's newsmaker has been former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, as we asked if the country was better off without him. With his death came a new beginning for Libya. It promised so much, but ultimately 5 years have been lost as rival groups pursue power and their own agendas. Now the country has a chance for another fresh start, but the new unity government will have a battle of a different kind on its hands as it tries to restore stability to the country. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. As always, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.